Wait, no, how do I say that? This is, put it into some, okay, so now I'm gonna, Valentine's Day means a host of different things to different people. It could be getting a box of chocolates from your mom for the 28th year in a row, to taking your significant other out for a nice dinner. Whatever it is, we think it should be celebrated because it's a sweet holiday. And for the sweet holiday, we've developed a recipe for a very special Valentine's Day cookie. This is a cherry and almond sandwich cookie that is just absolutely perfect to make with the people you love. Before we start mixing together the butter and the sugar, I want to combine my dry ingredients. Here I have 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 full cup of almond flour, which is going to add a nuttiness to the cookie, but it's also going to add a tenderness and a moistness. And then I'm also going to add 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. So I'm going to mix these dry ingredients together and then we'll move to the mixer. This is kind of a nerdy pastry chef thing to say, but I love adding almond flour to regular flour because of course it tastes delicious and whatever, but it also weighs down the flour so that when I'm whisking, it doesn't really want to jump out of the bowl or it doesn't want to go everywhere when I add it to my mixer. So this is another way that this cookie recipe is a treat. To my mixer, I'm adding 1 cup of unsalted butter. It's important that the butter's at room temperature. I'm adding 1 cup of granulated sugar. I'm gonna beat it on low so that the sugar doesn't fly out of the bowl in the beginning, but then once the sugar's incorporated, I'm gonna increase the speed to medium-high and let it whip until it's light and fluffy for about 2 to 3 minutes. To this, I'm gonna add 1 egg, 2 tablespoons of whole milk, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. And I'm gonna scrape down the sides before I start mixing again. The sugar is gonna dissolve into the egg and the egg's gonna catch a lot of air so that this butter sugar mixture will almost double in volume and become really light and fluffy. We're gonna let this go for another few minutes and get it to just the right consistency. All right, this is adequately fluffy. So I'm gonna scrape down the sides of the bowl and then add in the dry ingredients that we've already mixed together. So now we're gonna lock the mixer in place and just mix it on low for about 1 minute until there aren't any more dry pockets of flour. Now with our cookie dough done, we're going to wrap it in some plastic wrap and let it chill for an hour before we roll it out. If there was ever any doubt about that sweet almond flavor I was describing, at this point is when you can already smell it. So you know that it's definitely gonna come through once it bakes. As with any dough that you're gonna roll out with a rolling pin, before you refrigerate it, it's smart to go ahead and press it into a relatively flat rectangle. This just means the dough is already close to the shape and the thickness that you need to roll it out to. So it makes that process easier down the road. And then I'm gonna wrap it up in my plastic wrap. And this is going in my fridge for an hour. Here is my chilled cookie dough. It's significantly firmer than it was when it went into the fridge. So I'm gonna unwrap it. And I'm gonna really generously flour my work surface, put this on top of that floured surface, and then generously flour the dough again before I grab my rolling pin and roll it out. Okay, now it's time to roll, and a really quick tip, as you're rolling, after a couple passes in one direction, pick up the dough and turn it, and continue doing that as you roll it out. This does 2 things. It prevents the dough from cracking, and it also makes sure that the dough isn't sticking to your work surface. If you notice any cracks in your dough's surface, just use your fingers to press those cracks together. All right, we're rolling the dough out to 1/8 of an inch thickness, and mine is there. So now it's time to cut out my heart shapes. A quick note, the number of cookies that you make is going to be dependent upon the size of the heart-shaped cookie cutters that you have. You can do this with any size heart-shaped cutter you have. The only requirement is that you have 2. So you need to have one that's larger and one that's smaller. We're gonna punch out 30 of these cookies, and then on 15 of those, we're gonna punch out a smaller one and place them on the baking sheet to bake. The smaller ones that we punch out, you can either re-roll to punch out more cookies or bake on their own for a separate treat. I'm gonna transfer both my whole heart cookies and my heart-shaped cookies with a hole in them to my parchment-covered baking sheets. Okay, now that my cookies are cut out, I've got them on several baking sheets. I've got my oven preheated to 375 degrees, and I'm gonna put these cookies in the fridge for 10 minutes before popping them in the oven. This helps the butter to firm back up so that the cookies keep their nice edges rather than becoming too soft and pooling out while they bake. So into the fridge for 10 minutes and then into my oven for 9 minutes. It's time to put my cookies in the oven. My cookies are out of the oven and I'm gonna transfer the cookies to this wire rack to cool completely before we fill them and dust them with powdered sugar. I'm gonna take all of the hard cookies that have the center punched out and put them on a work surface. I went ahead and lined my surface with parchment paper because we're gonna dust these with powdered sugar to give them a really beautiful white contrast to the red in the center of the cookie. And I'm just gonna coat them using a fine wire mesh sieve. Your cookie's a little misshapen or maybe a little too brown on one side or something, this is gonna make it look professional regardless. And now I have my whole cookie. So here I have some cherry preserves and I'm gonna spread about 1 teaspoon of the cherry jam in the center of the cookie, leaving a little bit of a border. The reason we leave the border is because the weight of the cookie on top being pressed into the bottom cookie is gonna push some of the jam to the edges. Now that this cookie has the cherry jam, I'm just gonna take this heart-shaped cookie with a little window and press it in, and you can just see immediately the cookie looks professional and finished. It's gorgeous. I'm excited to bite into one of these. Let's go. Almond and cherry is one of my favorite flavor combinations in the world. So I'm incredibly biased, but this cookie does all the right things for me. It's crisp. I can taste the butter and the vanilla, but then the almond comes in at the same time that I'm getting this really sweet, smooth jam. And so the contrast in textures is making for an eating experience that's really special. I'm actually gonna take another bite. Yeah, I'd give this to somebody I love, including myself. And I think you should too. If you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe below. And if you make these cookies, please let us know how it goes in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much. See you next time. Bye. I feel like there should be like a law, you know, that like you either are only allowed to give a Valentine to a close friend or to someone that you have a committed understanding of a relationship with, you know? Like none of that in between.